Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to take a first look at the Week 9 NFL slate on Draftkings and Yahoo. We're going to go through this slate position by position, quarterback through tight end, talk about the guys that stand out to me very early on in the week. I'm recording this video on Monday night, shortly after Monday Night Football ended, so I haven't really done too much research looking at the main slate, haven't dug really deeply into it. These are just kind of my first looks, my first thoughts, what I see early on in the week. We'll go through each position. As we do that, we will build out a first look lineup, more cash game based, talk about players that mainly stand out, either due to matchup, maybe price tag, maybe they're too cheap for the volume that they're getting right now. So, we'll do that at each position. Just before we do get started, guys, as always, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like button down below. If you are new to the channel, be sure to click that subscribe button as well. A lot of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. I believe it's like around 60% of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. So if you're part of that 60%, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. It is free. Click the notification bell as well, so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You'll never miss out on any of my new videos. And if you do really enjoy these videos and if they help you out a lot and you want to get more content from me, I have stuff available on Patreon. You can check that out, link down below in the description if that does interest you. All the links and everything are down below in the description. But let's go ahead and take a look at this Week 9 slate. We'll start off at quarterback like we always do. So at the top, Patrick Mahomes, once again, our most expensive option on the slate. He is 8,100. Pretty sure he was 8,100 last week. Against the Panthers at home. Really good spot for Patrick Mahomes once again. Always a guy that I'm going to consider paying up for in tournaments, especially, in like stacks. If I'm looking to stack up this game, maybe stack up Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, running back with someone from the Carolina side. I could see doing that in tournaments, obviously. Cash games, though, I don't know if I'm going to be able to spend 8,100 at quarterback unless we just get like a lot of value throughout the week. That's always something, you need to take note of. But for now, at least like early on in the week, I don't think I would be able to pay up for Mahomes in cash. Tournaments, though, he is always a great play. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was in the Millie Maker winning lineup on last week's slate, even at home against the Jets as massive favorites. Mahomes went out there and threw 5 touchdowns, had a really big game. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him do that once again this week against the Panthers. So I do like Mahomes, but more, suited for tournaments. He's a little bit cheaper on Yahoo. I think that's probably where it looks the most interesting this week. He's not the most expensive quarterback over there. He's actually cheaper than Russell Wilson. He's cheaper than Kyler Murray. He's the same price tag as Justin Herbert. So if I was going to play Mahomes, I think I'd be more likely to do it on Yahoo. Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, these guys are great plays as well. Kyler gets the Dolphins at home. Russell Wilson, a little bit of a tougher spot on the road against the Bills, but we've seen so far this season, Russ is pretty much matchup proof. I mean, his floor is just so high. Worst game this season was Week 4 against the Dolphins when he put up 24.9 DK points. He's pretty much giving you a 25-point floor this season. He has that 35, close to 40-point upside as well. Russ is always someone I like. I never mind paying up for. Kind of the same with Kyler Murray, Mahomes as well. These guys are just really on another level this season. They've been so elite. They've been just the highest floor guys at the position, highest ceiling guys as well. It's tough to pay for them, like in cash games though. It's tough to pay that much for a quarterback. It just kind of depends on the slate. And, obviously early on in the week, there's not going to be a ton of standout value. That could always change throughout the week. But for now, I'm going to look to go a little bit cheaper. So Josh Allen is someone that really stands out to me looking at DraftKings pricing. I know he's kind of been, trending down the last few weeks. 16, 18, 20, 13 DK points. His last 4 games have not been pretty. He was on such a torrid star, a big tear to begin the year. Had 33, 37, 36 DK points his first 3 games, then 25 against the Raiders. He's definitely gone downhill since then, but he's had some less than ideal matchups against the Patriots. I mean, on the road against the Jets, you would expect him to play better. That game against KC, there was some weather in that game. It was rainy, it was cold. Not the best game from Josh Allen overall. Now he gets to face the Seahawks at home. I've been streaming quarterbacks against the Seahawks all season. I played Jimmy Garoppolo last week, and although that didn't work out, this Seahawks team is just a team that you can attack through the air. They've allowed the most passing yards per game, 364 passing yards per game so far this season. Really good spot for Josh Allen. We know this is a guy that gives you rushing upside as well. When they get down to the goal line, he's always a threat to punch it in. They'll let him, whether it's a goal line quarterback sneak or like a read option, they'll let Josh Allen punch it in the goal line. I think at $7K, he's kind of like the underpriced quarterback this week. Out of all the top tier guys, I just feel like Allen should be a little bit more expensive than he is. So I'm going to plug him in for now into the first look build on DraftKings. Now, looking at Yahoo's pricing, I talked about Patrick Mahomes, who I think is underpriced over there. Josh Allen, also $35. You could definitely play him on Yahoo. But let's talk about Lamar Jackson. Lamar is all the way down here at $31 on Yahoo. He's the same price tag as Matt Ryan. Look, I know Lamar has not been good this season. He's not really been the same guy that he was last year. He still gives you that elite upside, though, and we kind of saw that in that game against the Eagles. He threw for 186 yards and 1 touchdown, but he was still able to score 28 fantasy points because he had 108 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. We know he still gives you that elite rushing upside, can throw for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then run for 75 yards and a touchdown. Although he hasn't been the same elite, QB1 type guy that he was last season, the upside is still there. The spot here against the Colts on the road, not the best matchup. I mean, the Colts have a solid defense, but, this game's going to be played in a dome. I'm pretty sure the total is pretty high in this game as well. I haven't looked at totals yet. I would assume it's somewhat high. We don't really have to worry about weather concerns or bad conditions. They're going to be in the dome on the turf. I like Lamar a lot at his Yahoo salary. I think $31 is too cheap. I think Yahoo is, they're taking in this season's stats a little bit too heavily. Lamar, although he has not been that great, should never be, as cheap as he is on Yahoo. The upside is still there for him. He's still one of the highest upside options at the position week in and week out. I've been playing him a lot recently. It hasn't really worked out, but I think at $31, the price tag's too low for Lamar Jackson. So I do like him at that Yahoo salary. On DraftKings, Josh Allen's the guy that stands out to me early on in the week. As the week goes on, I'll be able to give more updated thoughts on the slate. I'll have my final look video posted on Friday. But for now, that's just kind of the few guys that stand out to me. You could play Lamar on DraftKings as well. He's $6,900. His price tag has come down on DraftKings as well. But still, if I can find $100, I'd probably rather play Josh Allen in that scenario. But then, in the 6K range, I don't see really any cash game plays here, at least not early on in the week. Some guys you could consider for tournaments, like if you want to stack up Stafford, they're going to be without Kenny Golladay most likely, but you could definitely stack him up with a guy like Marvin Jones, who I do like this week, and then maybe running back with Dalvin Cook. I can see doing that in tournaments. It's a great matchup for Big Ben, but I don't really want to play Big Ben in cash games. I just don't know if the ceiling is really there, the upside's there, and I still am looking for upside in cash. Although floor is really important, upside, having quarterbacks, running backs can, break off, big games. We just haven't really seen Big Ben do that this season. His floor is, he has a pretty good floor. He's most likely in this matchup, you would expect him to give you 18 to 20 fantasy points at the least. But, can Big Ben go out there and score 30, 35 DraftKings points? I don't really see it happening even against Dallas. Whereas Josh Allen, some of these other guys for a little bit more could easily put up 30-plus point games. But Matt Ryan, Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, I don't think these are guys I'm going to really be looking to this week. Talking about cheap options, if we're going cheap at the position, I don't really see much value. Tua gets a good matchup against the Cardinals, but he was not great in his debut. I know their defense played really, really well, and Tua just wasn't needed. He only threw the ball 22 times, only had 93 passing yards, though, 1 touchdown, only 6 DraftKings points. It was definitely a really tough spot against the Rams. Like I said, the defense came through for them. They didn't really need Tua to throw the ball much. Against the Cardinals, this is a better spot, but $5,500, he's not that cheap. So honestly, I'd probably take a shot on Drew Lock against the Falcons. If I was going to play anyone cheap this week, I think Drew Lock's the guy that stands out to me the most. Only $5,200. I've been playing quarterbacks against the Falcons as well, like the Falcons, the Cowboys, the Seahawks. These are teams we definitely want to take quarterbacks against. These are just some of the worst defensive teams overall in the league. Although the Seahawks have been solid, kind of against the run, they're definitely a team you can beat through the air. But the Falcons overall, this is a team that their defense is just bad all around. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, doesn't really matter. I'll play anyone against the Falcons. $5,200 for Drew Lock. I think he is definitely in play as a cheap option. We could look to him for value this week. If you want to go cheap, I wouldn't mind him. But I really like Josh Allen. I think he's my favorite option just right now. So let's go ahead and talk about the running back position. Normally always a position I like to pay up at. Normally you're always going to have some of the highest floor, highest ceiling plays on the slate come at running back. And that's, we kind of saw that last week with Dalvin Cook. Broke the slate, put up 50-plus DraftKings points. We'll talk about him in a second. But starting off, Christian McCaffrey, we do have to mention him because it looks like at least most likely that Christian McCaffrey is going to be back this week. They said he's hopeful to play. There was a chance he could have played last week against the Falcons, but they decided not to play him. I assume that Christian McCaffrey plays. This will be something we need to monitor throughout the week. There are some question marks for him. We saw at the beginning of the year he was priced at $10K, so we are getting a discount on him. Christian McCaffrey is still the highest floor and upside player in the league, in my opinion. He was taken number 1 overall in season-long drafts for a reason. This is a guy that even on bad weeks can still give you 18 to 20 fantasy points. KC, they're a team that I'm pretty sure in the past, they've been a team you can run on. Also, you would expect Carolina probably playing from behind, which is honestly probably a good thing for a guy like Christian McCaffrey who is so involved in the passing game. We'll have to watch his status, if he's going to be limited or anything. With Mike Davis playing so well, I'm worried a little bit about Christian McCaffrey's role. Obviously, he's going to be still a workhorse guy, but I don't know if he's going to be a guy that plays every snap like he was playing, last season. He was kind of a guy that would just be out there for 90+% of the snaps. I think we are going to see Mike Davis involved, especially early on. As the season progresses, McCaffrey may kind of, take that full workload, get that, 90+% snap workload again, but I do have some question marks with him, at least, in his first game back. So for that reason, I think Dalvin Cook probably is the better option, the safer option, 8,200. Dalvin Cook, obviously coming off a massive game where he had 51 DraftKings points. Look, I don't think you're really point chasing here. I mean, Dalvin Cook's a guy that you can play pretty much every week. He's the number 2 running back in fantasy behind Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion. His workload is about as secure as McCaffrey's is. If they get down to the goal line, Dalvin Cook's going to be the guy punching it in. Even if they get behind, Dalvin Cook will still be out there catching passes. He's just so involved in this offense. If they're ahead, they're just going to pound the rock with Dalvin Cook. If they're behind, he'll still get some screen passes, some checkdowns thrown his way. Against the Lions, at home, I mean, this is a really good spot. I think at 8,200, Dalvin Cook's a guy I do want to probably try and pay up for this week. I prefer him over Derrick Henry for sure. Just a much better matchup. Cook's involved in the passing game, can get 5, 6, 7 receptions, whereas that's very unlikely to happen for Derrick Henry. So I'll go ahead and plug in Dalvin Cook. There is some value. I like at receiver, and there's some cheap tight ends that I can play that should make it pretty easy to get to him. He looks like one of the better pay-up options at the position, at least early on in the week. And then these mid-range options like James Robinson, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, I think all 3 of these guys look like really good plays. James Robinson gets the Texans. This has been a team that you can definitely attack through the ground. They've had a pretty bad run defense this season. They've allowed the second most rushing yards per game at 165. Robinson did face the Texans earlier this season and really, really struggled. Only 11 DraftKings points. Had one of his worst games of the year against Houston, but I wouldn't expect that to happen again. This is a guy that gets a very, very secure workload, is kind of a game script proof guy. If they're ahead, they'll pound the rock with James Robinson. If they get behind, he'll still be out there catching passes. At 7K, I think he's a really strong play. You could definitely look to him. James Conner gets the Cowboys. This is probably my favorite play overall in the mid-range. Conner's another guy that, if they get ahead, Conner's going to be toting the rock. He's going to be out there. If they get behind, they'll still involve him in the passing game. And Dallas, their defense, man, their defense has just been so bad this season. Through the ground, through the air, it hasn't really mattered. They haven't been able to slow down anyone. I haven't looked at totals yet, but I assume this game probably going to have one of the higher totals on the slate, if not the highest. I'm sure Pittsburgh has a very, very high implied team total. It's a great spot for the Steelers. I think we're definitely going to be targeting a lot of Steelers this week. And James Conner, 6,900 on DraftKings. He looks really good this week. Very cheap on Yahoo, very affordable over there at just $26. Cook and Conner, probably the 2 running backs I'll be looking to start my lineups with, at least early on in the week. Things could change. We could get some value at the position, but those are probably 2 of my favorite, pay-up options overall. And then if we wanted to play 3 running backs, which I normally do look to do in cash games just because running backs give you, in my opinion, the highest floor and the highest ceiling. Like Chase Edmonds, I mentioned, with no Kenyon Drake, I think Chase Edmonds is very likely to see, a workhorse type role. I'm sure they're going to involve some other guys. I don't even know who they have behind Chase Edmonds. Let me pull up Arizona real quick just to see who they have. They could maybe sign someone, but it looks like right now they have Eno Benjamin and they have Jonathan Ward. These are 2 guys I haven't heard of before, but I assume Chase Edmonds sees a pretty heavy workload with no Kenyon Drake. This is a guy that I'm very high on. If you just watch Chase Edmonds play, when he gets touches, he is so explosive. He's very efficient with his touches. He's another guy that can catch passes, that if they get behind, he'll still be involved, can catch 5, 6, 7 balls, can carry the rock if they get ahead. I assume if they get down to the goal line and they're not letting Kyler run it in, that Chase Edmonds will be the guy running it in. Against the Dolphins, a team you can run on, I think Chase Edmonds makes a lot of sense as like a flex option. If we want to go with 3 running backs, we can definitely make it work because there is some value that I do like at receiver. So I'm going to plug in Chase Edmonds into the flex. I just think there's so many good, strong running back plays like at the top and in the mid-range that I don't really want to play 4-route receivers in my main lineup just because I think that limits my upside a little bit. I think in cash games, in my main cash game lineup, I usually always look to get 3 running backs in, and that's going to be the case most likely this week with Cook, Connor, Edmonds, Robinson. Like, these are guys that just stand out as really, really strong plays. I mean, you even have like Josh Jacobs, who's going to tote the rock, probably 20 plus times, especially if game script leads that way. They'll just keep handing it off to Josh Jacobs. He could be a play you look to. In this 5K range, David Johnson against Jaguars, I wouldn't mind him at 5,600. Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay are in a great spot against the Falcons, but I normally don't play one of those two guys. Like, when they're both healthy, it's a pretty even 50-50 split between the two. Tough to go there when they're both healthy. If one of them were to sit or something, then that would make the other one in play. Like we saw a couple weeks ago when Gordon was out, Phillip Lindsay became a really good value. Whenever these two guys are healthy, it's kind of a situation I look to avoid, in DFS. Le'Veon Bell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they get great matchups this week against the Panthers, a team we've always looked to take running backs against. But, we saw last week, Edwards-Helaire, I believe, only got 9 touches, even in a game where they were up, big time the whole game. Edwards-Helaire only got 9 touches. Le'Veon Bell only got 9 touches. Like, we're going to see a pretty even split between these two guys. Predicting which one gets, like the goal line touchdown is going to be pretty tough. So, hard to really go there. I think if you were to go cheap at running back, there is a cheap option that stands out. Justin Jackson, 4,900 against the Raiders. He's continued to get pretty good volume with Austin Eckler out. I believe Eckler is going to be out at least one more week. He might be back next week, but I don't think he's going to be back this week. We saw Justin Jackson get 20 touches last week. Got 20 touches against the Saints. Like, his workload's definitely, it's not secure by any means because we saw against Jacksonville he only got 10 touches in that game, but he's another guy that gets, involvement in the passing game, can catch 4 or 5 balls, can get targeted 6 or 7 times. The Raiders are another team I've looked to take running backs against this year. We saw them involve, I believe, Travion Pope. I can't remember the guy's name. I know his last name's Pope. I think it's Troy Maine Pope. He was involved last week. He got some touches, got 10 carries, got 5 receptions as well. Like, Joshua Kelly really wasn't involved at all last week. Barely got any touches, if I remember. Yeah, he only got 7 carries and 1 reception, so he kind of, like, we saw Pope kind of out-touch Kelly last week. I still think this is like a 3-headed committee, so it's tough to really consider these guys like locks or good plays or like smash plays when, it's a 3-headed committee. But if I had to pick one of the 3 to play, it would definitely be Justin Jackson. I think right now, at least in terms of value, like, he's the one value that you could go to. Maybe Wayne Gallman, depending on what happens with Devontae Freeman. We saw Wayne Gallman have a decent game Monday night against the Buccaneers. He did find the end zone. You maybe could go there at 4,500. But let's go ahead and touch on receiver. Before we hit receiver, we'll plug in a cheap defense real quick for our build. Defense is normally a position, early on in the week, I don't really dive in too deep. I think, looking at defense on Yahoo, just finding cheap defense. Normally look for cheap defenses at home. The Titans were the first team that stood out to me at home against the Bears. The Bears offensively are not the best team. We know Nick Foles will take sacks. He'll turn the ball over. We can plug in the Titans D for cheap on Yahoo. And then Draftkings, I really don't want to play the Cowboys, but you got the Vikings against the Lions. You got the Bills. You could play against Seattle. The Bills still have a solid defense. They're at home. 2,400. I'm fine just plugging them into our first look build. I usually always look to, pay down at defense. I want to try and fit in as many studs, receivers, running backs into my lineups as I can. I'm not going to pay, 3,500, 4K for a defense when defense is such a, hard position to predict. We saw last week the Dolphins were one of the cheapest defense on the board, and they wound up being the highest scoring defense on the slate. Like, I just don't see the reason to pay up for defense when it's just, such a high, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, high, I can't even think of the word, but just so up and down. Like, you just never know. A defense could score 20, a defense could score -2. Even the Steelers, the Steelers are 4,900 this week. Like, I would never pay that much for a defense. Sure, they could go out there and get a ton of sacks, force some fumbles, get a couple pick sixes, but they could also give up 14 points, only get 2 sacks, and finish with 3 fantasy points. It's just, yeah, I don't pay up a defense rarely. So let's talk about receiver now. Obviously, in this lineup build, we're probably not going to be able to pay up at receiver, but, there's great plays at the top here. DeAndre Hopkins against the Dolphins, you could definitely play him, stack him up with Kyler Murray. Stephon Diggs, I really like in tournaments. I don't know if I'll be able to get there like in my main cash game lineup, but I think Diggs has a lot of upside against the Seattle secondary. You could definitely look to stack up Diggs and Josh Allen. We'll need to keep an eye on Calvin Ridley's status. If he's out this week, that would definitely give a bump up to Julio. You could definitely play Julio. Tyreek Hill against this Carolina secondary, I wouldn't mind either. Keenan Allen, I've been playing a ton recently because he's been so underpriced. Now he's up to 7K. It's a little bit tougher to play Keenan Allen this week, but he just continues to get massive volume week in and week out. So he's once again a guy I would consider in tournaments. Probably not a cash game play though, now that his price is coming up. Tyler Lockett, 6,800 against Buffalo. I like that spot a lot. Buffalo's been a team you can attack with slot receivers. We know Lockett is their slot receiver. And we've kind of seen this season, like, whenever DK Metcalf goes off, it seems that Tyler Lockett goes off the next week. And whenever Tyler Lockett has a big week, it seems that DK Metcalf goes off the next week. Like, Tyler Lockett went for, a massive game against Arizona, 3 touchdowns, and then dudded against San Francisco. And then we saw DK Metcalf really struggled against Arizona, but then put up a massive game against San Francisco. I don't know how much you would weight that, but it seems like one of these two guys puts up a massive game. Rarely do you see both of them go off. And so, at least as of late, it's been, Lockett has a big game, then Metcalf has a big game, then Lockett has a big game. If the trend continues, it's going to be a Lockett week. So, and honestly, given the salaries, given that Lockett's $1,000 less, I'd rather play Lockett between the two Seattle receivers. But Will Fuller, another guy that's just been so consistent this season, at least 100 yards or a touchdown in every game but one so far this year. And the one game where he didn't do that, he was hurt. Will Fuller just continues to be a guy that I look to roster. He's been really cheap on Yahoo recently. Let me see his price over there. Will Fuller's still $23 on Yahoo. So if you want to play him on Yahoo, I think that price tag is very reasonable. You could definitely look to him. Even Adam Thielen against the Lions, I wouldn't mind that. Let's talk about Terry McLaurin, though. I do like Terry McLaurin quite a bit against the Giants. The Giants do have a solid secondary, specifically James Bradbury. They're a really good corner. We saw him kind of give Mike Evans some troubles Monday night. Evans did still find the box, did still, of course, score a touchdown, have a decent game. But even when these teams played in Week 6, Terry McLaurin still had 14 Draftkings points, 7 catches for 74 yards on 12 targets. He's just going to get big-time volume week in and week out. He's their number one receiver. He's going to get all the looks. This Washington team is pretty bad overall. They're going to be playing from behind most weeks. I don't know if that'll be the case this week. I think these two teams are pretty even. I think Washington honestly might be a little bit better than the Giants. 6,500 on DraftKings is kind of expensive for McLaurin, but I still like him in tournaments. I think he's going to be pretty low owned. Now on Yahoo, he is very affordable over there. Him and Will Fuller are two guys that do stand out a lot in the mid-range. I definitely like McLaurin at that $22 price tag on Yahoo. He is one of the guys that does stand out kind of in that mid-tier, that $20, $22 range. I really like him, and I really like Fuller. Those are definitely going to be guys that I'm most likely going to be on this week. Robbie Anderson as well. Tough to get to him on DraftKings at $6,300. I think there's guys that are cheaper that I'd probably rather play. But again, you go over to Yahoo and you look at the pricing over there. Robbie Anderson, only $19. DJ Moore as well, only $19. Between the two, I'm usually always going to prefer Robbie Anderson, especially if they're the same price tag. Now, if DJ Moore is way cheaper, I'd rather play Moore. That's the case on DraftKings. Robbie Anderson, $6,300. DJ Moore's $5,600. Probably would rather save the salary and play DJ Moore there. But Robbie Anderson, for $19 on Yahoo, I do like a lot here. He's been the number one receiver for the Panthers this season. He's leading the team in targets. This is a game where you would expect the Panthers to be playing from behind. They're 10.5-point road dogs here. Even if they get Christian McCaffrey back, Christian McCaffrey will draw some targets, but I still expect Anderson to see a good amount of volume. I expect the Panthers to be throwing a lot. At $19, I think that is a little bit too cheap for him in a game where they should have to throw a ton. Definitely like him in that mid-range on Yahoo. On DraftKings, I'd probably rather just play DJ Moore for cheaper. These guys do project pretty similarly most weeks. I think Robbie Anderson's probably the safer play because I think his volume is more secure. Both guys, though, have big-time upside. You could definitely stack them up with Teddy Bridgewater. I wouldn't mind doing that in tournaments. I think it is going to be a pretty low-owned stack. And then you could obviously get to some exposure to some guys on the KC side. I'm going to have a good amount of exposure to both sides of that KC-Carolina game. I think if it stays close, it could be a pretty high-scoring game. It could wind up being a shootout. So just my thoughts there. But like in this 5K range, we talked about DJ Moore, who I do like. A lot of these Dallas receivers have come way down in price. Amari Cooper is only $5,600. CeeDee Lamb's only $4,900. And then you got Michael Gallup way down here at just $4K. I know it's not the best spot against the Steelers, who have a really good defense, but this Dallas team is just so bad that they're going to have to be throwing a ton. You would expect that to be the case once again. I haven't looked at the line yet, but I would assume Dallas is probably 6-point, 7-point dogs here, even at home. They are at home, which I do like. At home, these receivers do tend to play better. They're in the dome, on the turf. Gallup, especially Amari Cooper, I know he's always been much better at home when he's been with the Cowboys. $4K for Gallup, I think, is a little bit too cheap. He did see 12 targets last week with DiNucci behind center at quarterback. I am assuming they get Andy Dalton back this week. I think Dalton could have played last week. I know he was doubtful, but I think there at least could have been a shot, whereas most likely this week, Dalton will be back. I think getting Dalton back under center is obviously a boost. I mean, DiNucci didn't really look good at all last week against the Eagles. Getting Dalton back is a boost. At 4K, playing for a Dallas team that's going to be playing from behind, most likely going to have to throw a ton. I think Michael Gallup is too cheap. I think he's my favorite of the three Cowboys receivers when you just factor in price tag. Gives us some good correlation as well. Playing James Conner, like if the Cowboys or if the Steelers get up and they're just pounding the rock with James Conner, we could see on the other side Dallas trailing a ton, throwing the ball a ton, and we see Michael Gallup get good volume once again. So I like him a lot as a cheap option. I think these Cowboys receivers, even though it's a tough spot, I think Cooper, Lamb, Gallup, like all these guys have upside still, and they're all really affordable. My favorite two would probably be Lamb and Gallup just because they're way cheaper, but wouldn't mind Cooper either. I think all three are going to be pretty low owned. Maybe Gallup gets some traction just because he's so cheap, but I do like all three of those Cowboys receivers. I'm probably going to be stacking up this game on both sides, even on the Dallas side, because I think a lot of these Dallas guys are going to be low owned because their offense has just been so bad. Like, people aren't going to want to pay for these Dallas guys, but I think there's still some upside, and this game could shoot out in a dome, good conditions. That's usually something I always look for, when targeting shootouts. But another guy I do want to target in this 5K range, or at least I want to talk about. So Marvin Jones Jr., $5,100 on Draftkings, really cheap on Yahoo as well, coming in at $15. Definitely a guy I do want to mention. So with Kenny Golladay most likely out, I believe last update we got, at least as of Monday, was that Golladay was most likely going to be doubtful. He isn't expected to play against the Vikings, so with no Golladay, Marvin Jones is going to step in as the number one receiver. He's only $5,100. He didn't really see much of a price bump up, and it's a really good matchup against Minnesota. Another game, being played in a dome with good conditions. I really like Jones at $5,100. I think this is a guy that has talent still, that is a guy, when he gets the targets, he can produce. Got 7 targets last week, was able to score twice, get into the end zone twice, 3 for 39 with 2 touchdowns. I know Golladay was out earlier this season. I can't remember what game it was. I know Golladay missed a game, though, and Jones really, I believe it might have been the first 2 weeks, honestly. Weeks 1 and 2, Golladay was out, and, Marvin Jones really didn't do much those weeks, but he still did get 14 targets. Those were kind of some tough matchups as well against Chicago and Green Bay. Now he gets to face the Vikings, a team that's just, at this point, they're running out rookies at corner. Like, they weren't able to slow down Devontae Adams. He had a big week against them last week. Like, they've just been dealing with injuries in their secondary. Their secondary is just nowhere near as good as it used to be. This looks like another game that has a lot of shootout potential. I really like Marvin Jones at $5,100. I think with no Golladay, he does see a pretty big boost this week. It makes a lot of sense, like in that 5K range. And then another guy right below him at 5K, Deontay Johnson. So this is a guy that it seems like either he goes off or he gets hurt. Like, that's what it's been so far this season. He's played 3 games where he's not gotten hurt. Week 7 against Tennessee, weeks 1 and 2 against the Giants and against Denver. 10, 23, and 29 DraftKings points in those 3 games. And then week 3 against Houston, he got hurt. Week 5 against Philly, he got hurt. And then last week against Baltimore, I believe he played most of that game, but he did get hurt towards the end, or maybe it was like around the third quarter. I can't remember, but $5K for Deontay Johnson is still a little bit too cheap, especially for this matchup against Dallas. Dallas, like, they just can't slow down anyone, man. Their defense is so bad. They haven't been able to stop anyone through the air or through the ground. Johnson has shown upside when he gets, the playing time, when he's healthy. He has shown big playability. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's got double-digit targets in 3 of their 6 games so far this year I know Chase Claypool's been emerging. I know Eric Ebron's been doing well as well. I know this Steelers offense has a lot of mouths to feed, but I think Johnson is probably he's been their number one receiver so far this year. I'm pretty sure he leads the team in targets even after some of these bad games. You take out these games where he got hurt, and he's been like he's had an awesome season pretty much besides the injuries. The injuries have really killed him, but if he can stay healthy, not get injured, Johnson has so much upside against this Dallas secondary. At 5K, I think he is a little bit too cheap. I definitely like him in that 5K range. There's some value at receiver you could look to as well, like CeeDee Lamb we talked about, even like a Sterling Shepard for 4,800 I wouldn't mind. John Brown's pretty cheap against Seattle. I like that matchup. He's only 4,600. You got Darnell Mooney coming off a solid game. He's only 3,900. You could definitely look to him, but that's kind of receiver for me. That's pretty much the receiver position, at least as of now. So let's go ahead and hit on tight end real quick before we end the video. Obviously, we are not going to have the salary to pay up at the position, but Travis Kelce is an awesome play every week. If you can find the salary to fit him in, feel free to do so. I think, in tournaments, looking to stack up Mahomes and Kelce and then run it back with like a Robbie Anderson or a DJ Moore, I think that makes a lot of sense. We saw that be in the winning lineup last week. The winning lineup in the Millionaire Maker, I believe, was a Kelce, Mahomes, Hill stack, and then ran it back with Denzel Mims. That's just what's been winning tournaments this week. It's been, quarterback receiver stacks and then one run back option, or maybe sometimes two run back options. Then you'll have like a secondary stack, maybe a quarterback and a running back and receiver from a different game, like a Connor and a Gallup. So if you wanted to stack up like Mahomes, Kelce, Hill, run it back with Anderson, and then play Connor and Gallup, like that's something I could see doing in tournaments. I'm not sure what that would leave you with for salary, but that does, seem like a tournament build you could do. Always like playing Kelce if I can find a salary to get to him, but I don't know if this is a week where I'm going to be able to spend $7,200 for Kelce in cash games. Normally, I can never spend that much for Kelce, or normally I can never spend that much for a tight end in cash because there's always guys you can target for cheap at the position. And a couple of cheap options I do like. So as you can see here, we got 4,600 left for our last spot. We have enough to play like Noah Fant, Eric Ebron, Mike Gesicki. Noah Fant's probably my favorite option here at 4,600. Just continues to get the volume every week, like 10 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets. He's kind of been their number one pass catcher. Jerry Jeudy hasn't really been doing much this season. He's kind of been a little bit of a disappointment. Fant's still been incredibly consistent, though. He started off really good, did score weeks 1 and 2, had 19 to 17 DK points. Then he kind of got injured after that, I'm pretty sure, after week 4 against the Jets. Was dealing with some injuries, but he's looked solid the last few weeks. He's still getting the volume. This is a great game between the Broncos and Falcons in terms of, DFS appeal. I think there's plenty of good plays on both sides. This game's going to be played in a dome. It's likely to shoot out. We talked about how bad this Falcons defense is. I think for 4,600, in terms of cheap options at the position, Noah Fant's probably my favorite value at tight end on DraftKings, at least right now. You could definitely play Eric Ebron against the Cowboys, but I still think Fant gives you a little bit more upside. Evan Ingram, I'm a big fan of. I still think he's very talented. For 4,300 against Washington, I could see going there. Even Hayden Hurst, especially if Calvin Ridley can't go, I think Hayden Hurst gets a big bump up if Ridley's not able to play, so that's another guy you could consider for value. But those are just kind of a few tight ends that stand out to me early on in the week. Now, looking at Yahoo's pricing, it's a little bit tougher to play Noah Fant over there. He's the third most expensive tight end. He's actually more expensive than Mark Andrews. I probably won't be playing Noah Fant on Yahoo. I won't really have the salary to get to him. If I'm going to pay up, it's Travis Kelce for me at $26. He's the best option by far at the top, but probably won't have the salary to do so, so I'll definitely need to be looking for some cheaper options. I didn't mention TJ Hawkinson, but I think, with no Kenny Golladay, he does see a boost. You could play him at $19. Hayden Hurst, cheap option. He is only $15. But Evan Ingram, $12 on Yahoo. Again, really, really cheap this week. Had a decent game Monday night against Tampa Bay. Got 10 targets, 5 catches for 61 yards. He's still getting the volume every single week. I know he has not put up a big game yet. He hasn't scored more than double-digit fantasy points, talking about regular scoring. Hasn't scored more than 10 fantasy points this season. But this is still a guy that has big play upside, that is incredibly talented, is a great pass catcher. He's probably one of the best pass-catching receivers, or tight ends, in my opinion, just overall in the league. I wish the Giants would use him more. The volume's still going to be there, though. Washington's definitely a team you can attack with opposing tight ends. I know he struggled against Washington earlier this year, but for $12, that's damn near minimum salary. I think Evan Ingram, talking about like Jack Doyle, Mo Alley Cox, Darren Fells, Ferkser, Cameron Brate. Like, definitely give me Evan Ingram over all those guys. I think he is probably the best cheap option on Yahoo at $12. And that rounds out our Yahoo lineup, at least early on, our kind of our first look build. And that rounds up our DraftKings build. So hope you guys did enjoy this video, and I hope it did help you. Hopefully you got some good out of it. If you enjoyed, hit that like button before you do get out of here. Hit the subscribe button as well. Be sure to click that notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. And if you have not yet, if you want to get more content from me, you can check out all that I do have to offer over on Patreon. That is linked down below in the description. Be sure to check out the Patreon if you are interested. But best of luck this week, guys. Be sure to check out more of my content coming out this week. My showdown video for the Thursday night game. My final look for the main slate will be posted on Friday. Be sure to check out all that content. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Best of luck this week. Hope you guys win some money. We'll see you in the next one. Good luck, guys. Peace.